Hello everyone and welcome back to Prestige Reef. It is day 17 of my 30-day vlog series and we are back in the coral farm because we are finally getting out and preparing those corals that I said 2 days ago that I would get out and prepare to put into the water box tank. Now some of you might be thinking, what does he mean by preparing them for the water box tank? Well, I'll show you what I do with every single coral before it goes into either my systems or also any of the coral farm systems as well. Now there are two things you should be aware of. Firstly, any home seller or any shop that says they have no pests, it is incredibly unlikely, including myself. I try harder than most people to keep as much as I can out of these tanks. However, it is literally impossible because some of these creatures are microscopic. They go down to a cellular level and then can grow from that. So it's impossible to try to eradicate them from your tank by visual inspections and dips alone. And the reason I'm saying this is because people ask me all the time, should I dip corals when I get them from you? And the answer is absolutely yes. I am not trying to hide anything. More often than not, I will remove all the plugs and bases. I will also dip the corals. I will visually inspect them, and then I will put them in the tank. I even do that if I'm transferring them from system 2 to system 1 or vice versa. Am I perfect? No is the answer. But if I miss something, I have a whole army of fish to get them for me. Copper bands for Aptasia, wrasse for flatworms, tangs for all the weird algae you can possibly imagine, harlequin shrimp for the Reef Dork branded Asterina starfish. Right now, the first thing I'll do is I will remove all the frag plugs because that's where all the nasties like to hide and lay eggs. Things like flatworms, nudibranchs, vermitid snails. Now, this is easier said than done for me because I have a saw specifically for cutting corals. Now, some people use a Dremel, some people use literally frag cutters, which you can do, but it's not always advised with Euphyllia because their skeleton's really brittle. When you crush them with the bone cutters, sometimes it will split all along the skeleton and kill the coral. Right, so the first thing I'll do is I'll have a really proper look at the skeleton, as well as the flesh band on frog spawns, torches and hammers, because you want the flesh band to be complete all the way around. And this is also where you can quite often see flatworms. And then I'll dip it in a very weak iodine solution, just swirling it gently. Just try to get anything off of it. It's also an antiseptic to stop it from getting any infections during the move. Now the saw is always too noisy to show me cutting, but what I'll essentially do is I'll cut at the very base of this, and I'll just glue it back onto another frag plug very gently, because this frag plug is just temporary, and then after it's been in the tank for a week, I'll just break the plug off. Right now you can see that I've already taken off most of the frag plugs, and this first dip again is just another weak iodine dip. The reason I put them in here first before I dip them properly is just to get off any coral slime, because the corals obviously produce lots and lots of slime when they are going under the saw, and also just to remove any sort of detritus. It's essentially just to get the basic dust and stuff off of them. You can see in the end I went for one of Sam's Alveopora. I decided to add a candy cane just to see how the angel responds to it. I've also gone for the Dragon Rider, Sunrise Montipora. There's a couple of acros I've put in here as well, which weren't in the last video. And I've also added one of the really toxic green toadstools, although I think there's a possibility that will get eaten because it's soft. And then I've got obviously a variety of different hammers and frog spawns. Now some of you will notice that this is actually more corals than in the last video, and that's because I'm going to put this tray in the bottom of the water box, and this tray has 16 frag plug holes, so I thought I might as well get 16 individual corals. I'll then transfer them all over to brand new frag plugs. Now the main reason for this is just to hold the corals in place. Obviously once they are ready to go onto the rock work, I will remove all the frag plugs again, which is why I will only use a very small amount of glue on these plugs. Some of you will wonder if it's okay to have the coral out of the water for this long. They are totally fine. It's not unusual for me to have them out of the water for up to an hour sometimes. Right, so the next thing I do is I get 2 clean bowls of water from the tanks. And the reason for this is I want to know exactly what is on these corals. Now obviously when there's all this coral slime and detritus and stuff like that from the saw, it's not easy to see what comes off. So I prepare brand new ones. What I do is I use a coral dip. The coral dip I use and have used for years is Coral RX. I believe they were one of the first brands to have a coral dip. They've stood the test of time and it works for me. Now I need to have 6 drops in each of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like how I couldn't film and drop them at the same time and count in my head. Now what you want to do is you want to put the drops in first, stir up the bowls, just to properly mix that dip in, and then put the corals in afterwards. What you don't want to do is you don't want to put the corals in first and then put the drops in afterwards, because then some of that will land on the corals, and obviously it'll be a much higher concentration than what is recommended. Right, now that the corals are in, you can see why it's so important to change the water for clean water, just so you can see exactly if anything comes off the corals. Also, this process helps for the glue to dry, because coral glue only dries when it's wet. Right, now the next part is vitally important. Just putting them in the dip alone is not enough. What you need is a turkey baster of some sort, and then you need to use it to blow the corals to see if anything comes off them. The dip only irritates anything that's on the coral. Once they're irritated, they're easy to get blown off by a turkey baster. Now obviously, if I kept using the other water, you wouldn't have been able to clearly see if there was anything coming off them. There's still some detritus in there, and I can see there's little amphipods and copepods, but so far so good. There doesn't appear to be anything that is worth worrying about. The other thing for me to mention is I wouldn't normally dip this many corals all at the same time, especially different species. Now, one of the reasons I am doing it is because I am about to do a live stream with Reef in about an hour, so I don't have a huge amount of time. The only thing I have done where possible is to try to keep the corals from touching each other. And also I've separated the Euphyllia over into this bowl here. But as I said, so far so good. It appears that my wrasse and copper bands and everything seem to be doing an excellent job. Right, so that's 12 minutes up, so then literally just take the coral, try to get as much of the dip water off of them, put them into some water from the water box just to rinse off any dip, and then place them onto the tray so that I can just move them easily into the water box. Now the reason I rinse them all off is because ideally you want as little of the dip as possible getting into the display tank. And this is also when I'll do one final visual inspection to see if there is anything of interest on the corals. And now it's just time to put them in the water box. I've tried to position them in a way where they won't sting each other, but I might have to shuffle a few things around once they're in there. The final and one of the most important things to do is to check the dip afterwards to see if there's any nasties in there, because this is your chance. This is almost like this is like doing a test. Not checking your dip is like doing the entire calcium test kit and then not reading the results at the end. So this will tell you if you have anything to worry about in the tank, and from the look of it, we are good. There doesn't appear to be anything in here that would concern me. Right, that's it for today, guys. Hopefully you have learned something, and hopefully it will mean that you can keep as many pests out of your tank as possible. But remember, if you do get a pest in your tank, there are so many ways to deal with them these days. It's not like the old days where we really didn't know what we were doing. So just don't panic. If you get a pest, don't panic. There is a method of removal, I can assure you. As I said, I now have a 2-hour live stream to go do with Reef. Please feel free to comment below if you have any questions. If you did enjoy it, why not click that like and subscribe button. Have a good day, and I will see you tomorrow.